In this video, we'll be deep diving into the Wall album. Soak in soul-stirring tunes, but also unravel the mysteries hidden within the cassette tape. The Wall is the 11th studio album by the English rock band Pink Floyd, released on 30 November 1979 by Harvest, EMI and Columbia, CBS Records. It is a rock opera about Pink, a jaded rock star who constructs a psychological wall of social isolation. The album was a commercial success, topping the US charts for 15 weeks and reaching number 3 in the UK. It initially received mixed reviews from critics, many of whom found it overblown and pretentious, but later received accolades as one of the greatest albums of all time. The bassist Roger Waters conceived The Wall during Pink Floyd's 1977 In the Flesh tour, modeling the character of Pink after himself and Pink Floyd's former member Syd Barrett. Recording spanned from December 1978 to November 1979. The producer Bob Ezrin helped to refine the album's concept and bridge tensions during recording, as the band members were struggling with personal and financial issues at the time. The Wall was the last album to feature Pink Floyd as a quartet. The keyboardist, Wright, was fired by Waters during production, but stayed on as a salaried musician. 3 singles were issued from the album: Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, Pink Floyd's only UK and US #1 single, Run Like Hell and Comfortably Numb. From 1980 to 1981, Pink Floyd performed the full album on a tour that featured elaborate theatrical effects. In 1982, The Wall was adapted into a feature film for which Waters wrote the screenplay. The Wall is one of the best-known concept albums. With over 30 million copies sold, it is the second best-selling album in the band's catalog, behind 1973's The Dark Side of the Moon, the best-selling double album of all time, and one of the best-selling albums of all time overall. Some of the outtakes from the recording sessions were used on the group's next album, The Final Cut, 1983. In 2000, it was voted number 30 in Colin Larkin's all-time top 1,000 albums. In 2003, 2012, and 2020, it was included in Rolling Stone's lists of the 500 greatest albums of all time. From 2010 to 2013, Waters staged a new Wall live tour that became one of the highest-grossing tours by a solo musician. In 1977, Pink Floyd played the In the Flesh tour. The bassist and singer-songwriter Roger Waters despised the experience, feeling the audience was not listening and that many were too far away to see the band. He said, "It became a social event rather than a more controlled and ordinary relationship between musicians and an audience." Some audience members set off firecrackers, leading Waters to stop playing and scold them. On 6 July 1977, the final date at the Montreal Olympic Stadium, a group of noisy and excited fans near the stage irritated Waters so much that he spat on one of them. The guitarist and singer-songwriter David Gilmour refused to perform a final encore and sat at the soundboard, leaving the band with the backup guitarist Snowy White to improvise a slow, sad 12-bar blues, which Waters announced to the audience as some music to go home to. That night, Waters spoke with the producer Bob Ezrin and Ezrin's psychiatrist friend about the alienation and despair he was experiencing. He articulated his desire to isolate himself by constructing a wall across the stage between the band and the audience. While Gilmour and Wright were in France recording solo albums, and the drummer, Nick Mason, was busy producing Steve Hillage's Green, Waters began to write material. The spitting incident became the starting point for a new concept, which explored the protagonist's self-imposed isolation after years of traumatic interactions with authority figures and the loss of his father as a child. In July 1978, Pink Floyd reconvened at Britannia Row Studios, where Waters presented two new ideas for concept albums. The first was a 90-minute demo with the working title, Bricks in the Wall. The second was about a man's dreams on one night and dealt with marriage, sex, and the pros and cons of monogamy and family life versus promiscuity. The band chose the first option. The second eventually became Waters' first solo album, The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, 1984. By September, Pink Floyd were having financial problems and urgently needed to produce an album to make money. The financial planners Norton Warburg Group, NWG, had invested $3.3 million, up to $20.1 million in contemporary value. The group's money in high-risk venture capital to reduce their tax liabilities. The strategy failed when many of the businesses NWG invested in lost money, leaving the band facing tax rates potentially as high as 83%. Waters said, 83% was a lot of money in those days, and we didn't have it. Pink Floyd terminated their relationship with NWG, demanding the return of uninvested funds. Gilmour said he became closely involved in the business side of Pink Floyd afterwards. Ever since then, there's not a penny that I haven't signed for. I sign every check and examine everything. To help manage the project's 26 tracks, Waters decided to bring in an outside producer and collaborator, feeling he needed a collaborator who was musically and intellectually in a similar place to where I was. They hired Ezrin at the suggestion of Waters' then-wife, Carolyn Christie, who had worked as Ezrin's secretary. Ezrin had previously worked with Alice Cooper, Lou Reed, Kiss, and Peter Gabriel. From the start, Waters made it clear who was in charge, telling him, "You can write anything you want, just don't expect any credit." Ezrin and Gilmour reviewed Waters' concept, discarding what they thought was not good enough. Waters and Ezrin worked mostly on the story, improving the concept. Ezrin presented a 40-page script to the rest of the band with positive results. He recalled, "The next day at the studio, we had a table read, like you would with a play, but with the whole of the band, and their eyes all twinkled, because then they could see the album." Ezrin broadened the storyline, distancing it from the autobiographical work Waters had written and basing it on a composite character named Pink. The engineer Nick Griffiths later said, "Ezrin was very good in The Wall because he did manage to pull the whole thing together. He's a very forceful guy." There was a lot of argument about how it should sound between Roger and Dave, and he bridged the gap between them. Waters wrote most of the album, with Gilmour co-writing Comfortably Numb, Run Like Hell, and Young Lust, and Ezrin co-writing The Trial. The Wall is a rock opera that explores abandonment and isolation, symbolized by a wall. The songs create a storyline of events in the life of Pink, a character based on Waters and Pink Floyd's former frontman, Syd Barrett. The album includes several references to Barrett, including Nobody Home, which hints at his condition during Pink Floyd's abortive U.S. tour of 1967, with lyrics such as Wild Staring Eyes, the obligatory Hendrix Perm, and Elastic Bands, Keeping My Shoes On. Comfortably Numb was inspired by Waters' injection with a muscle relaxant to combat the effects of hepatitis during the In the Flesh tour in Philadelphia. The album opens with Pink, a rock star, addressing a crowd of fans at one of his concerts, to whom he is about to give an apparently unexpected performance of his life story. In the Flesh, A flashback on his life up to that point begins, in which it is revealed that his father was killed during World War II, leaving Pink's mother to raise him alone, the thin ice. Beginning with the death of his father, Pink starts to build a metaphorical wall around himself. Another brick in the wall, part 1. Growing older, Pink is tormented at school by tyrannical, abusive teachers, the happiest days of our lives. And memories of these traumas become metaphorical bricks in the wall. Another brick in the wall, part 2. Men of D Company, 1st Battalion, the Green Howards occupy a captured German communications trench during the offensive at Anzio, Italy, 22nd May, 1944. The death of Pink's father during the Battle of Anzio, pictured, forms the backdrop of the story. Now an adult, Pink remembers his domineering, overprotective mother, and his upbringing during the Blitz, Goodbye Blue Sky. Pink soon marries, and after more bricks are created through more traumas, he is preparing to complete his wall, empty spaces. While touring in the United States, he seeks casual sex to relieve the tedium of touring, though in making a phone call home, he learns of his wife's infidelity, young lust. He brings a groupie back to his hotel room, only to trash it in a violent fit of rage, terrifying her out of the room. One of my turns. Depressed, Pink thinks about his wife and fantasizes about committing violence against her. Don't leave me now. Feeling trapped, he dismisses the impact his past has had on him, while rejecting human contact and medication. Another brick in the wall, part 3. Pink's wall is now finished, completely isolating himself from the outside world. Goodbye, cruel world. Immediately after the wall's completion, Pink questions his decisions, hey you, and locks himself in his hotel room. Is there anybody out there? Beginning to feel depressed, Pink turns to his possessions for comfort, nobody home, and yearns for the idea of reconnecting with his personal roots, Vera. Pink's mind flashes back to World War II, with the people demanding that the soldiers return home. Bring the boys back home. Returning to the present, Pink's manager and roadies break into his hotel room, where they find him unresponsive. A paramedic injects him with drugs to enable him to perform at a concert later that night, comfortably numb. The drugs kick in, resulting in a hallucinatory on-stage performance, The Show Must Go On, where he believes that he is a fascist dictator and that his concert is a neo-Nazi rally, at which he sets brown shirt-like men on fans that he considers unworthy, in the flesh. He proceeds to attack minorities, run like hell, culminating in him imagining holding a violence-inciting rally in suburban London, waiting for the worms. Pink's hallucination then ceases, and he begs for everything to stop. Stop. Tormented with guilt, Pink places himself on trial before his inner judge, who orders him to tear down the wall as punishment for his actions, the trial. This is the opening of Pink to the outside world, outside the wall. The album turns full circle with its closing words, "Isn't this where?" The first words of the phrase that begins the album, "We came in," with a continuation of the melody of the last song hinting at the cyclical nature of Waters' theme, and that the existential crisis at the heart of the album will never truly end. The Wall's recording journey spanned multiple locations. Super Bear Studios in France hosted the band from January to July 1979, with Waters recording vocals at nearby Studio Miraval. Orchestral arrangements, supervised by Michael Kamen, took place at CBS Studios in New York in September. Over the following 2 months, Cherokee Studios, Producers Workshop, and the Village Recorder in Los Angeles became integral to the process. A planned collaboration with the Beach Boys at Sundance Productions in Los Angeles was abandoned but Bruce Johnston did contribute backing vocals on selected tracks. James Guthrie, recommended by Alan Parsons, joined early in the production, replacing emotionally drained engineer Brian Humphreys. Initially unaware of Ezrin's role, Guthrie was hired as a co-producer. The early sessions at Britannia Row were emotionally charged, with Ezrin mediating between Waters and the band. Britannia Row was initially deemed inadequate for the wall, prompting the band to upgrade equipment by March. However, a risk of bankruptcy due to their relationship with NWG forced them to leave the UK by April 6, 1979, for a minimum of 1 year. Waters relocated to Switzerland, Mason to France, and Gilmore Wright to the Greek islands. Equipment from Britannia Row found a new home at Super Bear Studios near Nice. Gilmore and Wright, familiar with the studio, enjoyed its atmosphere, having recorded solo albums there. Wright and Mason resided at the studio, while Waters and Gilmore stayed in nearby houses. Mason later moved into Waters' villa near Vence, and Ezrin stayed in Nice. Ezrin's poor punctuality clashed with Waters' tight schedule. Mason found Ezrin's behavior erratic. Ezrin's share of royalties was less, leading to tension and Waters mocking him with note badges. Ezrin later cited marital problems and emotional struggles. Waters' relationship with Wright crumbled during production. Ezrin and Guthrie worked on Mason's drum tracks during the day, returning at night to record Wright's contributions. Wright, eager for a producer's credit, agreed to a trial period but faced dissatisfaction. A confrontation with Ezrin led to Wright working only at night. Gilmore expressed annoyance, claiming Wright's lack of input was driving us all mad. Ezrin felt Roger was setting Wright up to fail. Wright faced personal challenges with a failing marriage and depression, exacerbated by non-residency. Band holidays were booked for August, with plans to reconvene at Cherokee Studios in Los Angeles. Columbia's offer for a Christmas release prompted increased workload and sessions at Studio Miraval. Waters suggested an earlier recording in Los Angeles and hiring another keyboardist to work alongside Wright, who refused to cut short his family holiday in Rhodes. Accounts of Wright's departure differ. Mason claims Waters wanted Wright out, while another version suggests Wright responded harshly to new recording arrangements. Waters insisted Wright leave, threatening not to release The Wall. Several days later, concerned about finances and interpersonal relationships, Wright quit. His departure was kept from the music press, and he worked as a session musician on the subsequent tour. By August 1979, the running order was largely complete. Wright completed duties at Cherokee Studios with session musicians Peter Wood and Fred Mandel. Jeff Porcaro played drums in Mason's stead on Mother. Mason left the final mix to Waters, Gilmore, Ezrin, and Guthrie, traveling to New York for his debut solo album, Nick Mason's Fictitious Sports. Technical constraints led to changes in the running order and content, with What Shall We Do Now replaced by Empty Spaces, and Hey You moved from the end of side 3 to the beginning. The band left the inner sleeves of the album unchanged as the November 1979 deadline approached. Comfortably Numb, with a duration of 31 seconds, features guitar solos voted the greatest by Planet Rock listeners. Mason's initial drum sessions at Britannia Row Studios occurred in an open space on the top floor. The 16-track recordings were mixed down and copied onto a 24-track master as guide tracks for the band. This method improved audio quality by syncing the original 16-track drum recordings to the 24-track master and removing duplicated guide tracks, though the band initially viewed this as witchcraft. At Super Bear Studios, Waters accepted Ezrin's suggestion to add orchestral accompaniment to tracks like Nobody Home, The Trial, and Comfortably Numb. Michael Kamen oversaw these arrangements, performed by musicians from the New York Philharmonic and New York Symphony Orchestras, and a choir from the New York City Opera. Sessions were recorded at CBS Studios in New York without Pink Floyd present, and Kamen eventually met the band after recording completion. Comfortably Numb originated in Gilmour's debut solo album, sparking disputes between Waters and Gilmour. Initially Rogers' record, it underwent changes. Waters changed the verse key and added chorus lyrics, while Gilmour expanded bars for I Have Become Comfortably Numb. Gilmour's stripped-down and harder version clashed with Waters' preference for Ezrin's grander Technicolor orchestral version. After a heated argument, they compromised. The song retained the orchestral arrangement, with Gilmour's second guitar solo standing alone. Sound design. Ezrin and Waters oversaw the album's sound effects capture. Waters recorded the phone call used on the original Young Lust demo, referencing his bitter 1975 divorce. Ambient sounds along Hollywood Boulevard were recorded by hanging a microphone from a studio window. Screeching tire noises on Run Like Hell were recorded in a studio car park, and a television set being destroyed was used on One of My Turns. Smashing crockery sounds were recorded at Britannia Row Studios, and television broadcasts were incorporated. One actor recognized his voice, accepting a financial settlement instead of legal action against the group. The Trial. The Trial, lasting 27 seconds, marks the album's culmination with Pink's internal trial, leading to the collapse of his wall. The maniacal schoolmaster was voiced by Waters, and actress Trudy Young supplied the groupie's voice. Backing vocals involved various artists, with Bruce Johnston and Tony Tennelly stepping in after the cancellation of the Beach Boys' planned appearance on The Show Must Go On and Waiting for the Worms. Ezrin's suggestion to release Another Brick in the Wall, Part 2, as a single, with a disco-style beat, initially faced resistance from Gilmour, but Mason and Waters were more enthusiastic. Waters opposed releasing a single until he heard Ezrin and Guthrie's mix. With two identical verses, the song felt lacking, leading to a request for children from Islington Green School to perform various versions of the lyrics. The resulting recordings delighted Waters, and the song became a Christmas #1. Despite controversy over unpaid children, they received album copies, and the school received a $1,000 donation. The album's cover art is one of Pink Floyd's most minimal, a white brick wall and no text. Waters had a falling out with Hypnosis designer Storm Thorgerson a few years earlier when Thorgerson had included the cover of Animals in his book, The Work of Hypnosis, Walk Away Renee. The Wall is therefore the first album cover of the band since The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, not to be created by the design group. Issues of the album included the lettering of the artist name and album title by cartoonist Gerald Scarfe, either as a sticker on sleeve wrapping or printed onto the cover itself in either black or red. Scarf, who had previously created animations for the band's In the Flesh tour, also created the LP's inside sleeve art and labels of both vinyl records of the album, showing the eponymous wall in various stages of construction, accompanied by characters from the story. The drawings were translated into dolls for the Wall tour, as well as into Scarfa's animated segments shown during the tour and the film based on the album. It is notable that the stadium drawn in the inner sleeve looks a lot like the Montreal Olympic Stadium, where the album's concept happens to find its origin. It seems plausible that the artist was inspired by the stadium's appearance in 1977 and its inclined tower, which was completed only at a third of its projected and present height, reminiscent of the many towers pictured in the artist's stadium. A film adaptation, Pink Floyd, The Wall, was released by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in July 1982. It was written by Waters and directed by Alan Parker, with Bob Geldof as Pink. It used Scarf's animation alongside actors, with little conventional dialogue. A modified soundtrack was created for some of the film's songs. On 21st July 1990, Waters and producer Tony Hollingsworth created The Wall, Live in Berlin, staged for charity at a site once occupied by part of the Berlin Wall. The concert included several artists and celebrities popular at the time, including Scorpions, Cyndi Lauper, Sinead O'Connor, Joni Mitchell, Ute Lemper, Tim Curry, Van Morrison, Bryan Adams, among others. The concert was broadcast on television in 52 countries and was later released as a video and album at the end of that same year. The band omitted the song Outside the Wall and instead played The Tide is Turning, a song from Roger Waters' 1987 solo album Radio KAOS. In 2003, the album was remastered, and for the first time the video was released on DVD. In 2000, Pink Floyd released Is There Anybody Out There? The Wall Live 1980-81, which contains portions of various live shows from the Wall tour, but mainly the shows in the Earl's Court in London. In 2012, it was remastered and released on the Wall Immersion box set as an extra. Beginning in 2010 and with dates lasting into 2013, Waters performed the album worldwide on his tour, The Wall Live. This had a much wider wall, updated higher quality projected content, and leading-edge projection technology. Gilmour and Mason played at one show in London at the O2 Arena. A film of the live concert, Roger Waters' The Wall, was released in 2015. In 2016, Waters adapted The Wall into an opera, Another Brick in the Wall. The opera with contemporary classical composer Julien Bilodeau. It premiered at Opéra de Montréal in March 2017 and was produced by Cincinnati Opera in July 2018. It is orchestrated for a score of 8 soloists, 48 chorus members, and a standard 70-piece operatic orchestra. In 2018, a tribute album, The Wall Redux, was released, with individual artists covering the entire album. This included Melvin's version of In the Flesh, Paul Bearer covering Run Like Hell, former Screaming Trees singer Mark Lanegan covering Nobody Home and Church of the Cosmic Skull, reworking The Trial. On September 19, 2019, Channel Awesome's internet series, Nostalgia Critic, released a music video review of the album called Nostalgia Critic's The Wall, featuring Corey Taylor and Rob Scallon.